So, good morning. We are glad you're here with us. We are full of good information, I hope, for you on this topic of looking at discipline and attendance through a resiliency building lens. I am building on the work of a team of colleagues that are no longer on the project with us, and I'll be giving them some recognition in a minute. But most importantly, these MTSS coaching series that we've done this year, we did one back on tier two. That's a good reference for you. It was October 14th. Also wanted to reference my lovely friends, Sabrina and Lauren on the team that did a great chat on attendance and coaching at Tier 1 on September 23rd, if you wanted to look at any of those. Today, we're focusing in on some of those coaching skills. When I'm coaching a system, a school, or a district supporting a school system, how do we look at attendance and discipline outcomes with that resiliency lens or promotion resiliency in mind? We're going to start with, because a big coaching skill is how do we do ongoing communication and messaging to our staff, our families, our kids in our school building. We'll start with some quick key messages to keep in mind on this theme. We will also go through some critical things we think about with professional learning with those key messages. Next, we're going to talk about how we use the problem-solving process with attendance and discipline to then increase tiered supports and intensify tiered supports with that resiliency consideration in mind. And then last but not least, probably your favorite, is my district approach or example. Katrina Taylor is one of the most passionate people I know on this topic of resiliency building and mental well-being. And we'll talk a little bit about what it's looked like for her as a behavioral health director to integrate behavioral and mental health and interventions in a very large urban district of Duval County. So with that in mind, I am hoping, because we had a very big group and a diverse group here today, in the chat box, what's one thing you're hoping to take away or learn about or take with you today? There really is no wrong answers here. I'm just curious, what were you hoping to get out of the session today? And if you're just here to learn, that's okay too. But just looking for some quick feedback from the group in the chat box. What was one thing you're hoping to take away from today? If you don't mind giving me some quick feedback in the chat. Thank you, Larry Porter. Hi, Larry Porter. Learning how to better integrate PBS and resiliency. We will definitely be focusing on that. New to position here, Megan. You're just coming to learn. I'm all about coming to learn. That's totally fine. Recap and analyze. Oh, we are definitely going to focus on that too, Vanessa. Better teacher outcomes. Jennifer Smith, we're going to start right off the bat with that. All right, well, keep them coming. Thanks to friends who've already supplied some for me. First key message, we want to make sure if I am in a school and if I am a district leader supporting schools, I want to make sure I'm always coming back to if I'm already a school doing PBS or MTSS for behavior with fidelity, I'm already known from several research empirical studies to be promoting these outcomes. And these outcomes are very important with a resiliency lens because when you see the improved student outcomes, one, I know those are some we wanted to focus on, one being attendance. Those are a collection of reduced risk for kids with resiliency and increased protection for resiliency. So, for example, academic and achievement and pro-social behavior, big protective factors for kids that promote resiliency. Attendance, protective factor. My favorite studies I read were on the emotional regulation of kids. Think self-management. There's lots of terms to talk about skill, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later. But knowing that it promotes that in kids, big resiliency factor. So you kind of get the theme here. A lot of these lists of outcomes that we know if we do this model and framework with fidelity, we're already promoting many outcomes, reduced exclusionary discipline being another one in the middle, that are going to reduce risk for kids with resiliency and school buildings and promote their resiliency. So that's an important start. Plus, it's a nice, okay, that I remember why I'm doing this approach. I don't want to abandon it for other things. We're doing it already to promote these outcomes that we know are going to promote our resiliency protection for students and then reduce a lot of risk factors for them across the lifespan. And then last, Jennifer, you had just mentioned the last column. One of the things about school climate that builds resiliency and helps keep staff and educators in our buildings is some of the outcomes they've seen with this model and teacher efficacy while bringing teacher-student relationships. We're going to talk a lot about that one. And then, of course, some of those other protective factors. We reduce discipline and increase attendance to get into academic student engaged time. So we're going to talk about those factors a little bit more today, but that's my first critical message for you. And if you walk away with nothing else, just that by doing this model with fidelity, you're reducing risk factors and promoting those resiliency factors for schools and students. We don't often make those connections, but it's a great one to make. Now, what we're going to continue to build on a little bit, and this is where I think my past colleagues, Karen Elfner, my current colleague, Nicole, and Dama Abshir in the field, who is doing clinical practice now for their work in this area. We've done a lot of collecting in that infographic you see on the right. The resource is hyperlinked for you if you want a little handout to go through this. Coming back to a key message. Why is this a foundational approach to resiliency building? It's because of the environmental factors that you see at the top there. Having schools that have a positive feel, positive language, positive interactions, they have routines, they're structured, they're consistent, so they're predictable. They promote safety. And then my favorite and probably most important theme of the day, they focus on really good, effective instruction, not just for academics, but for those behavioral or resiliency skills kids need. So again, that feature of positive school environment is very impactful across the lifespan for kids with resiliency. So we want to message that a lot to keep the momentum going for what we're implementing. And the handout includes, of course, our 10 critical features that we put a tattoo on you, I feel like, when you start this, but the little pie chart. And then we will be focusing on a little bit of our enhancements we made to Tier 1 in the last couple of years to make sure some of those resiliency features are listed in that instruction. But those are your quick walkaway points. And then my last bullet, that's why we push so much. Let's focus on monitoring fidelity. So if we monitor fidelity, what we're doing, we're promoting that trauma-informed and resilient school environment. So very quickly in the chat box, if you are a school person, how many of you have looked at fidelity of PBS this year? Just yes or no. Or if you're a district leader, have you helped a school look at fidelity this year? Just a yes or no. Have you looked at or started to monitor school fidelity this year? Ooh, nice. Oh, yay. I love all the yeses. That's very exciting. Okay, so you're already promoting resiliency through that fidelity lens. We have two last quick messages, the ones I would keep repeating as a leader to schools and as district leaders to your district teams and schools. We know academic instruction or good instruction is a huge protective factors for kids. But keeping that mindset on, and this is from our Tier 1 training, it's one of our enhancements we made. It's one of your critical elements for fidelity in the blue box there. We teach as part of this framework to promote all those outcomes that we're already trying to look for, such as attendance, reduced punitive or trauma, re-traumatization, I can't talk there, for students. And instruction builds that positive relationship that we said we'd be focusing on. So it's back to that environmental, but we're going to build on this one a little bit today with what we do when we increase instruction across tiers to integrate for resiliency promotion. And the little graphic on the right is in the infographic that was on the last slide for you. We're just unpacking it a little bit throughout the day today. All right, last key message. And this one I had to add a professional learning to it because in schools and when I was in schools, these are things we were talking about all the time. When we are working at any tier, we're always going back to that foundation of that environment to get those outcomes we just reviewed. So my favorite tool we have that I kind of offer all the time is the practice crosswalk. So it's the 5 critical elements of PBS classroom. That's your part of your blue box there in your benchmarks of quality that you look at. The 5 practices, what they are, what it looks like in the classroom with some video examples for modeling or other resources like our tip sheets and observation tools and self-report measures are also hyperlinked. But my favorite part is the last column. So back to that idea of what are we already doing that is promoting resiliency or that we're working on to foster fidelity for resiliency. This is a nice quick cheat sheet to message those things. That's how we're promoting resiliency through working on these practices. And not all 5 are on the screen, but of course, engaging instruction is one of these practices and how we engage students in that learning process. Expectations and rules is that pocket of instruction. So when we are doing good instruction, we can link all kinds of things. We can connect all kinds of curricula or embedded practice. For example, if you haven't heard, Florida Resiliency has a lot of curriculum materials out on resiliency traits known to promote resiliency with students. We put a little hyperlink there. That's where I would connect that to your ongoing instruction for student well-being and life skills and resiliency skills. Part of that expectations, rules, routines. If you would like a similar tool for school-wide, we hyperlinked it there, but I know Classroom is the most popular, so it's my favorite, and that's why I gave it to you today. Okay, so our next, we want quick key messages. Those are the things I would repeat over and over again, message out to your leaders and your partners and your school stakeholders. But now we want to move into across tiers. How do we integrate pieces of the framework to promote resiliency? And you've seen this one probably, if you're with us a lot, a million times, and that's on purpose. When we put the parts together of a system, it looks easy in this little paper, but it's not so easy. But we're going to focus a little bit today on that integration of what we already do and how we can promote resiliency through the data, how we use data through a problem-solving process to screen and use decision rules. That promotes resiliency through meeting needs. And then I mentioned we're going to focus a lot on integrated intervention and instruction in this session. So that one's hyperlinked for you. Again, the stacked tiers I can't emphasize enough because they've got to work together to be powerful or successful. So take a quick minute, just glance at the two columns who have boxes around them. You see some sample data sources. You see hyperlinked decision rules. And we are going to really dive into how we use this data to decide what tier, and then some of those basic pieces of instruction that we link on to. So for example, classroom, right off the bat, you see the classroom essentials with resiliency that is hyperlinked in this little resource as well. So let's dive into that part. And we were talking about this a lot in our team, that especially with attendance, we tend to kind of get off track with what we know to do with other outcomes. And it's really the same practice. So if I'm coaching a team in problem solving, we have to start with, to do the pieces of the puzzle in that last slide, a team has to start with any outcome or concern of a student outcome that they want to problem solve. We have to have an expected level to start this off. So it's going to answer for us what percent of students is meeting or not meeting, and it's going to allow the team to be more efficient and what tier to focus on, what they're going to adjust as they go. Because I know you guys as teams have very limited time out there. So we're going to start with a recommendation today, and that builds off of the past attendance chat that Sabrina and Lauren did a wonderful job with on our team. We encourage you to use your existing early warning systems criteria as that expected performance level. And just in case you think we're going off track, this is part of your data entry and analysis from your benchmarks of quality that you do as a team for that fidelity element. So how do we apply a decision rule to that? If we know an expected level, we can start with that basic, how much is 80% of students demonstrating that expected level? Now, I know the first one, 0 to 1 referrals, you guys, it's probably burnt in your brain. We talk about that one a lot. It's the core report, right? Like how many students are getting, no referrals or 1 referral. 0 to 1 ISS, zero, we hope 0 OSS referrals today, referrals that have led to an out-of-school suspension. And those all do match up, as well as our attendance one that's in italics there, with your school improvement plan. When I do my school improvement plan each year or part of your team, you're collecting that data because these are the indicators known to put kids off track to graduation. So if we start with that attendance, because it's the tricky one, we encourage that chronic absenteeism threshold, just like school improvement does, and it's in your school improvement plan. How much of our student population is meeting 90% of instructional days of attendance? And that's going to include excused, unexcused absences, and your suspensions. That's a really important messaging item. It doesn't matter why the attendance, but how much attendance that we're missing of instructional days. So that one is super important as early as pre-K through high school. And we encourage you, when you're going to problem solve and screen for attendance and discipline, this is how we start. We start with that expected level. We look at what percentage of students are meeting that expected level, because then we can do this magical thing. And if you are here out of any other academic domain, you are probably familiar with our state GTIPS manual. You've probably seen these decision rules several places in our state. But the idea of starting with that step we just reviewed is we know then if we have an expected level, where are we going to start? Because think of your own school or districts. Think of data you look at in your district. We'll say attendance is a problem. Well, how big is the problem? Is it a couple students having lots of missed instructional days, or is it a very large systemic issue where we want to focus in on some adjustments of that systems issue? So we can use decision rules with that expected level to know, let's start with some tier 1 problem solving, or if it's at 5 to 20%, we're going to start with tier 2 small group intensify. Same with, if it's fewer than that, we're going to start that individualized targeted problem solving, which is the most time consuming and the most resource intensive. And we're going to go through some quick examples with discipline and attendance. So again, resiliency promotion. Why is this connected? It's effective screening. If we don't do this, we're not screening for needs effectively and we're not matching students to interventions as well as we can. So that's the connection here to resiliency. So let's take a couple because I think this is probably pretty familiar to folks. Anything I go through too quickly today out of my excitement to chat with you on this topic for a very short time, you can follow up with your TA because we have several resources in these areas. But quick look at discipline. We already mentioned that expected level and how we look at core health. On the top is just that example applied with expected level of 0 to 1. On the bottom is a school example from one of our problem-solving courses that has ODRs, ISS, and out-of-school suspension. Green is a percentage meeting expected level. Gives us a nice idea to apply that last decision rule of how much of our population is demonstrating it, where we want to intervene. We also might use the thresholds of the yellow and red to be what we're going to use for screening criteria to 2 and 3. Now, someone asked about analysis. At tier one teams, we try to keep it simple for you. We're gonna analyze instruction and environment, but we're gonna do it, and this is from our tier one training. And I didn't ask that question, so I'm gonna ask that very quickly of you. How many of you have been through our tier one training in the last 2 years? Just if you've been to the tier one training, if you don't, oh, I just changed my screen. If you don't mind, thank you, Jennifer. I see that quick feedback. Great. Great. So if you have been through, oh, sorry, friends, I'm fixing this. If you've been through our tier one training, these slides will look familiar. If not, I'm going to make sure to reference where they come from. But when I say quick analysis, use the data source of what type of discipline we're seeing with the guiding question underneath for those month-to-month adjustments. That's going to help that environmental impact that we talked about at the beginning promotes resiliency. If we don't do this kind of analysis as part of data entry and problem solving, we're not promoting resiliency through improved environment and maybe not getting those outcomes that we wanted at the beginning to promote resiliency. All right, so the tricky one, attendance. Let's do the same application here. And we just use one of our reports that's fairly new in the last 2 years. Each school year in your FTE5 survey counts, so that last one, you get a count of total student enrollment and that 90% threshold, that expected level we practice with students either meeting or not meeting. So in these reports, if you have active PBS schools, you have this report in your PBS database, and it will show you the graph below compared to the Florida median of a percentage of kids meeting that. I just downloaded the table version of it too, in case you are a table person. So when you look at this data in a sample school, this is going year by years up to 2021 to 23, 24. They increased in percentage of kids that, and yes, this is a little bit tricky, percent that have 10 plus days absent. So this is representing the non-expectation, the student percentage that's not meeting. So if 25% of my student population is not meeting that tier one attendance expectation, where would you problem solve in the chat box? If I have 25% of students are not meeting that expectation for attendance, what level or tier would you problem solve? All right, I love all my friends rocking it today. Tier one. Now, Nicole, I see tier two. I never, and I meant to say that with my decision rules earlier, is any of this ground in stone, the 80%, the 20%? In real life, of course, there is flexibility here. So even if I problem solve, I would agree with the tier one here. I can still problem solve those who might have, missed 20% or more, who are getting that threshold that's more intense while I'm doing some things in tier one. And that's kind of the goal of when we go through instruction today. Also, if I'm a school at 75% meeting expectation and not that full 80, is anyone going to come after you if you start with tier two and three? No. But the idea here is efficiency and what makes the most sense. And honestly, we can always do some sprinkling and improving in tier one pretty much. And then similar, I just want to model discipline and attendance. If you do that expected level that way to promote screening, you can then analyze a little bit more, just like we talked about with discipline, to then see what are some of those trends we're seeing at tier one that we might adjust some of our supports to. And I'm going to prompt Katrina a little later on the last question. I know she had an interesting story in her team about clustering in specific neighborhoods and attendance and what they did with some efforts there. So I'll have her share that a little bit. So if we talked about two data sources, discipline, attendance. When we analyze barriers, I gave you two models of simple analysis, especially at tier one, keep it simple. Um, Here, if you want more structure, when I say we always come back, if it's tier one, if you have a lot, like we just did with attendance, always start with the fidelity measures you have. So for example, there's some guiding questions here and tools. As active PBS schools, you're implementing and collecting fidelity data for this purpose. You want to be analyzing what's going well and what's not going well. So just highlighted questions for feedback. If you are a school representative, have you seen school-wide PBS implementation pretty evident at your school? So is that just question three? Have you seen that it's pretty evident at your school, and how do you know that? And does your team review regularly? When do they review regularly for fidelity data? So just questioning the group, if you are a school or district support, do you know that PBS is going on in your building, or do you have time where you regularly review and update that PBS implementation or action plan? All right, Brooke Reynolds rocking it right off the bat. Monthly analysis is beautiful. And if I'm using some type of fidelity, if it's not a formal, like a benchmarks, it might be those classroom tip sheets, it might be observations, it might be informal feedback or PLC feedback from grade levels. Love it. Megan, thank you for that. Monthly, love it, love it. Love the walkthroughs. Walkthroughs are great. And then Jennifer, I see that quarterly. Wonderful. So regular schedule or review is going to help you a lot here in promoting resiliency through fidelity monitoring. And then using different measures are formal on the right or informal that were listed. Okay, friends, if you want the cliff notes, I gave you big picture fidelity in regards to some particular elements that we focus in on, and its hyperlink there is all 10 elements in our implementation planning template for teams. We use that in tier one training to get for initial schools how they're going to do each part. For you who have been doing this a long time, you're kind of constantly revisiting that plan. Each year I was in a school, we were always perfecting it. So Cliff's notes that we're going to focus in on a little bit when I said you can always sprinkle some things in tier one as we build on intensity. These are the ones I would focus in on. And Lauren and Sabrina did a great job the last chat focusing on this. I'm going to just touch on it quickly. That positive messaging. When we engage family students with any kind of instruction, behavioral or on the importance of attendance, do we do it positively? And is it part of what we teach kids are important with attendance and behavioral expectations? Do we have a good plan going that works across our campus? How we teach the expectations rules that promote attendance and positive behaviors? And do we need a little bit more focus on some of those resiliency traits? The ladies did a last great job in the last chat of how do we use acknowledgement or reward as part of instruction. It's one part of the framework. We use it to beef up things we've taught. So it's why it's right after the instruction question. We strengthen those behaviors that we have taught through rewards or acknowledgement. And I did add here attendance works that we referenced in the last one and here because they are great. They are the national experts in attendance. They have some nice examples to add on to the ones shared in the September chat of how you can reinforce attendance, use group competitions in attendance, involve student voice in that, which is all wonderful. So if you didn't take some of the ideas from the September chat, we hyperlink that one there for you. And then I have to mention it. It's going to be the part that I probably leave some slides for reference for you. But we teach, we reinforce, we have to be consistent in how we respond to behaviors, and that's that effective discipline piece. So big factor of effective climate, all those outcomes for resiliency we mentioned at the beginning, and also what is going to engage students to want to be at school. It's a big feature for attendance of do I feel safe? Do I feel like I'm treated well? Do I feel like I'm connected? So with that in mind, positive messaging. Again, the ladies covered. I just want to highlight a couple more because there are so many good ones. Based on your code of conduct that you have policy around, add to positive messaging. Why is attendance important? Why do we want kids there? Just like when we teach rules and routines, rationale. And attendance works has a wealth, but I put two on the right. They do have them by grade level that are great. You can even use them in your own messaging. And then another link at the bottom on 10 facts about why school attendance is so important. Because it was brought up in the last chat, it was a great point. They have a really nice handout and some resources on when do I go to school when I'm having health concerns. Sometimes we have parents who either keep them home out of caution, or just feel uncomfortable with that decision of should I send them. They have some nice resources there that are great to share. One more example, positive messaging. And this is not a Florida school, but just a quick, we all do letters or, e-blasts or whatever your method is of parent communication. The letter on the left connected not just why it's important to be there and why we care about kids, but linked it directly to their instructional curriculum. So what happens when I miss some of that instructional, daily instruction with that curriculum? Because that's that rationale piece. So positive messaging plus the rationale. And then on the right, they use a quick postcard system. So it personalizes it to the student with that positive messaging. We're reinforcing and recognizing you've been in attendance. We're so glad you're here. That connection is modeled really well. As well as in the bottom, a tool for communicating. Really happy there, that care and connection is present in how we're communicating about attendance. So again, similar to how we train them when we talk about behavior, that first reach out, we want to be positive and recognizing it helps create those relationships to keep people engaged, and it engages your students to want them to be at the school building. Okay. So as far as positive messaging, and again, the ladies the last time did a lot on that too, which was great. And Katrina and Duval does a great job. I'll let them talk about that a little bit more. We said sprinkling in, and I love the word sprinkle, like it's like that in real life. But as far as tier one, well, let's start. I love the term cliff notes. Really easy things to consider. We want to beef up our tier one environment for like if we're that school with attendance. Some things that engage students, connect them to school, and are part of what we're already doing. The easiest one, and I love it because I've worked with several schools that did this, greeting students at the door. I had one school, Title I in a district I used to work in, that started greeting students at the door and cut their discipline referrals in half. When students feel like they're welcomed and we want to see them there, then that helps them engage to want to come to school and connect to school. It also promotes positive relationships to start their day and promotes that I want to exemplify those positive behaviors because I know we care if I'm here. And that is hyperlinked. There's actually a center handout on greeting students at the door with different options. It can be verbal greetings, it could be nonverbal greetings, it could be different methods, routines you have. Another one is morning meetings or classroom circles. I love morning meetings and classroom circles. They're amazing. I never did them, but I've seen so many great educators do them. Real nice way to start your meeting with a relationship circle. It's a great way to integrate some everyday instruction to set the routines and the set for the day. Welcome kids there. I put one example we have of a lesson plan on a school. It's an elementary school that uses circles to teach their expectations as part of that routine, plus some resiliency skills. So it's a great instructional routine in a very busy day in a school to get some of that in here. And then just the simple things. And we have a great school contact in one of my districts that shared that talked she's an attendance monitor as part of her role, but just engaging students and acting interested. I know it sounds simple, but I did give you one survey we have in our classroom coaching guide. It's Appendix D. But do we ask them what they like? Do we know about them? Do we care about backgrounds? We can tailor that to be towards students who are starting to have trouble. We'll talk about that a little bit if we need to, especially our busy secondary campuses that have lots of kids. But maybe we greet all students at the door and try to really make sure we're just getting some interest and backgrounds. They want to talk about whatever they want to talk about. And I have to remember that with my teenager all the time. Don't just talk about school, right? So other simple things. And again, these are things that we hope all are doing, but great reminders. Always welcome our students back when they're absent for any reason. If they're absent for an absence or they were absent because of a suspension or transition or maybe an involuntary hospitalization, whatever the reason is, welcome them back, care, concern. Clear routines on how to catch up, especially my secondary friends. If I am out, really clear. They'll know what to do or how to ask for support to get caught up on their work easily. That doesn't tax our educators, but also helps them know what to do. That's why routines are so important for that predictable environment that we talked about, promotes resiliency. It also allows kids to catch up quicker on the academic part. That's another well-being or resiliency factor. And then my reference slide today from Tier 1. Effective discipline in our materials is all about how do we correct mistakes and errors. We are going to have to correct and we are going to have to keep relationships with kids, but we want to keep that idea of instruction. Remember, I said that's like the word or the element of the day. How do we teach and practice things to correct versus just punitive? Okay, because I can't say it enough. As we talk about the other tiers and we finish out sprinkling in tier one resiliency pieces, we are based on PBS is based on a social skill instructional approach. Social skill instruction is the routine at the very bottom of the slide. We teach explicitly, we model, we practice, we rehearse, and we do it over and over to build fluency, and then we monitor how it's going. So we do that at tier one, tier two, tier three. It gets more intense at tier two and tier three. So we do that because of the types and reasons you see. And we already mentioned why this is so important for resiliency. If I don't have a skill, I have to acquire it, which is going to take that explicit instruction. Just like I need inferencing and comprehension for reading, or I need, oh, my son is in AP pre-calc this year. I guess I need pre-calc skills. So I have to acquire those and master those. We got to teach it. Same with some of these resiliency traits or behaviors. We got to practice for that performance and fluency. And then our environmental approach here is always removing those competing problems or reducing those from around kids who are starting to acquire and have those skills. So keep this in mind as we go through, because I think sometimes we forget we're tier one even, we're doing social skill instruction as part of those lessons. On the right, I put some of the links to examples of what we mean by that, and then another great area to connect those Florida resiliency lessons. They have some of those resiliency traits linked to protective factors. So we can use those or other district approved lessons to be that tier one if it's a tier one problem, or tier two or three if we're seeing it for certain groups of students or individuals. All right, on that note, any approved, we've been asking our district coordinators this and we got lots of answers. What approved programs are you using to teach social and resiliency skills? I'm just curious in the chat. What are some programs that you use or materials that you use as we go into this piece of how we enhance tier one before we talk about tier two and three? Any chat or any programs you're using for either that required mental health instruction in your districts or schools, or just as part of your PBS instruction across tiers that you use? Katrina, you are also welcome to chat in any of, oh, I see it, Linda. A second step that you use in Duval. I do have an example a little bit later for you. Overcoming obstacles. Jennifer Smith sounds very popular. I'm hearing it a lot. All right, Medal of Honor. Thank you, Larry Porter. Second step, Medal of Honor materials, overcoming obstacles. Oh, Sanford Harmony. Yeah, we'll talk about that one. Okay, Lauren, if no approved curriculum, you are going just straight social skill instruction. And that's how our tier one training is. We give you lessons where we're going through that format you see at the bottom of the screen, and we put some language to our teaching matrix, which I'll talk about on the next slide. Oh, thank you, Valerie. Navigate 360, that's another popular one. All right, so the idea here is use curriculums that are approved to align your expectations and rules. Back to the Brevard that was just saying they don't have approved curricula. We start with in PBS just putting together, defining what are our expectations for that common language. When you develop your expectations, we ask you, that was one of our adjustments we made to build in resiliency to our tier one. Are the resiliency, or excuse me, the expectations or values your school is choosing? Do we get feedback from people before we finalize them? And do they link to mental health, well-being, and are based on your data? So for example, responsibilities on this one. Responsibility is a huge mental health and protective factor. I see teams all the time in that activity say they're not really sure about the mental health connection, but making responsible decisions throughout our life, following rules, it protects us across life. Versus if we don't develop those skills to be responsible or have responsible decision making. And it is one of the Florida resiliency traits that is linked at the bottom there with those curriculums. So if it's an expectation, we then start with what does it look like? And most of the time across settings, we put in rules. If you think of this as your little planning template. In addition to rules, though, we want to think of, and they're in italics, and I put some really messy highlight just to be annoying, but you can see where I mean some of those internal traits. Practice empathy. We're going to invite others to lunch who are sitting alone. That's a respectful way to join students. That's going above and beyond rules. It's an internal empathy behavior that promotes resiliency. See some others. I mentioned self-regulation, self-management. I love the idea of breathing techniques. That's a routine on the next slide we'll talk about that we have in tier one that's vital across age groups. How do I manage my own emotions? And how do I recognize when I need to do something differently versus an unsafe or a maladaptive behavior? Similar to online, because online is everywhere. Man, I'm so glad I wasn't there when I was younger. But when we look at skills, how am I safe online? How do I use some of those really protective things for how I handle what's posted online or how I post online. And then again, guys, this is from Tier 1 training. We had enhanced this a little bit from just that basic teaching matrix a while ago. But if you're wondering, what does she keep meaning by resiliency skills across the lifespan? If you are a nerd in this field like me, there's a great resource at the bottom of risk and protective factors across the lifespan, a big, huge meta-analysis across life for school protective factors and kids. Um, but in elementary school, really important factors are friendship, peer relationship skills, being kind, that empathy piece, self-regulation management, and coping. Secondary, same thing, coping strategies, self-regulation, self-management. Told you that one's I wanted to do all across the lifespan. How do I resolve conflict and problem solve? And how do I build my self-esteem? So those are some crucial ones for a little cheat sheet of ones you consider. They are also part of Florida resiliency traits. They call them different traits sometimes. So for example, self-regulation is referred to as that self-management and self-awareness. Empathy is part of the kindness piece. Conflict resolution, problem solving is that critical thinking or problem solving in those traits, just to kind of map and connect the traits to those materials that are hyperlinked. All right, so other sprinkling of tier one. Building in, this is from tier one training, guys. So it's not new, it's an enhancement we made for this purpose. Thinking of routines, not just when do I turn in work and how do I come in the classroom, but how do I self-manage or regulate? And we gave you one sample with some other examples hyperlinked there and breathing practices. You could also look at some of the self-management and awareness materials from Florida Resiliency. Late to class, how do I come in? That's kind of like the idea of the how do I catch up on work? How do I come in, know what to do? So that saves me from lots of problems and protects me from things that could go wrong in that class. And then the last column is my personal favorite because I need this. All classrooms, when you think brain breaks here, you think Kagan strategies as engagement, but also helps refocus attention. How do we constantly practice things that make us successful and ready to engage in learning? And we gave you one example there, that grounding. But there's lots more examples in that hyperlink there. And again, because we have to go a little quick today, just want to give you a couple. And then intentionally, guys, as my last tier one piece, I put some slides. I couldn't help myself. We can't go through all the effective discipline today, but I did want you to have some of the tier one slides for reference. The resiliency piece here that I mentioned earlier with your focus on implementation, how do we consistently handle behavior on a campus? It is in almost all validated school climate surveys. It's a big well-being factor. It's a big factor for attending a school. Do we consistently respond in an effective manner? Do teachers handle things across a continuum quickly and efficiently? Same with office and then crisis. Do we respond immediately, excuse me, and efficiently with our crisis procedures? So the last two I'm going to just fly through because I don't want to go through them today, but I did want you to have them for reference, is because they're all tier one training slides. And a lot of you had mentioned been through that. These are the features from tier one training that we talk about in what kind of responses we want to keep in mind. Hyperlinked is that activity for you that I would revisit for strategies that you use and you're continuing to be part of this resiliency feature. And then the other two, again, tier one training slide, just wanted to give it to you. Those relationship-based practices we use we use correction that teaches and builds that empathy and relationships. So they're part of that examples across the continuum slide, but also just wanted to make sure you had them, even though I knew I didn't have time to cover them. Last one like that is the verbal de-escalation. This is a whole topic in and of itself, but it's from tier one training and it's listed as one of the factors. We have a little course for you if you want to access that link. We also have a nice little infographic that will come right back to some of those routines we mentioned earlier that we would teach on self-management and safety. But the idea here is I'm keeping students safe through skills that they practice, and then also protecting the classroom of students through safety and these verbal de-escalation skills. So again, the little skill course is linked for you or the infographic. So I'm going to wrap up with considerations that, again, we always spend the most time in tier one. How do we use data to screen and problem solving at tier one? And when we intervene there, how do we revisit fidelity of practices known to promote resiliency and sprinkle in some enhancements that we've already added in our tier one for that reason that are resiliency promotion focused. I asked in the chat box for your approved curricula for that reason. That's how you want to sprinkle in is using some of your approved curricula there through that PBS framework or critical element of lesson planning and teaching. So It's the theme of the day, right? Intensity of instruction is going to increase in tier 2 and 3. Reminder of our decision rules at the beginning. We start with that expected level. We decide what tier we want to problem solve. This is those tier 2 and 3 considerations. So we had another MTSS coaching chat a little while back. It seems like forever ago. It was actually October 14th. That feels like forever. Um, this idea, you can always reference that chat if you want more on tier 2 systems coaching, but the idea with data here, we had shared this example. This is what we call an intervention grid in the field by Kathleen Lane and friends. That what I want you to focus on is the boxes here. Think right now, everyone in this chat, what interventions do your school already utilize? Like a check-in, check-out? How do you use data to then, oh, and I bet you I see your raised hand. You want to,
Sorry, I just wanted to, you had a question in the chat
Mhm.
regarding the resources that you were sharing. Is there a particular hub that we can share with classroom teachers, or is it better to handpick resources?
So the particular key message resources had the classroom practices. I would definitely share that with teachers, that little resiliency crosswalk, plus our tip sheets there and the little coaching guide that we have for supporting teachers. Um, the one I just reviewed, the strategies, in the classroom tip sheets, there's a responding to behavior tip sheet that's part of those classroom 5 that has some nice examples that you could share. So again, focusing on classroom there. The continuum of supports resource that was in the last slide, that's a leadership team activity. So if I were sharing, I would work with a leadership team to review those and your school-wide framework piece of how we respond to behavior. That would be my guidance there. Same with the skill modules. The skill modules could be talking about any educator, but then integrated by the leadership team. So short gist here, tier 2, we're using data not just for that expected level, but who it needs that intervention. This is back to the answers earlier when some people said tier 1 or 2. We're using it to screen and define the criteria for tier 2. And here's 2 great examples of discipline criteria for tier 2 intervention, tardies and absences for that tier 2 intervention. Screening for risk is the resiliency feature. The other feature to interventions at this level, if we are doing more for kids, we are checking on them more often and making sure we have fidelity of those extra things we're doing. So we use data also for that piece of monitoring. So again, the reminder from that first infographic is MTSS, how we intensify. We intensify by doing more at the intervention and by using data more frequently to check on them and monitor fidelity more frequently. The other reminder in tier 2, and we talk about this a lot if you've been with us, same idea here, not new. For attendance and behavior, we're going to do less problem analysis, not as light as tier 1, but we're only going to group by common, we're going to do what we call standard protocol, to use our jargon term. We're going to group by function or common skill needs. Just like in reading, I group by these area needs for decoding or these area needs for phonemic awareness. We're going to group by function or skill needs. There are also some interventions like the instruction. We mentioned social skill instruction that address every function. So if you have those on your campus, you can adjust them by skill needs that are barriers to attendance or to discipline or effective behaviors. We also want to link a resource the ladies talked about before that's excellent, but uses language different than function. So Attendance Works has a really nice root cause worksheet that you can use as a team to identify, do lots of kids have this barrier? Do some kids or few kids have these barriers? They use the term aversion or disengagement. And I wanted to just give you a quick example of what that looks like across functions. So keeping this function idea in mind, if we are doing tier 2 interventions, like you probably have on your campus, there's their focus. They're increasing that connection to school, instruction, missing skills, and access to supports. If we're using that aversion and focus mentality to increase, here's some examples, and I bet you all have these. Check in, check out is they map that to some of those aversion features. It's wanting attention or connection, and that's some of the aversion features listed in that resource from Attendance Works. And there's how that looks for why it's a tier 2 intervention for attendance and discipline. Plus, a reminder that a check and check out does work well for attendance. So you can adjust your daily progress report for behavioral goals or attendance goals and has worked really well across age groups. You also increase family engagement there. 2 other quick examples. I bet you have them on your campus, those of you with us. Mentoring. If I am disengaged with school or starting to escape from attendance, or escape through maladaptive discipline behaviors. The purpose of mentoring is to re-engage and get them back connected to school. They don't have adult relationships or have success at school that they might need some help with. So the mentor idea is different from check in, check out. It's to reduce disengagement, connect to school, and supporting that academic success. And we gave a quick one that I feel like is nice and practical. There's that 2 by 10. We've talked about 2 by 10 in several outlets, but just to connect back to that tier 2 chat, that's a nice example of quick, easy, practical mentoring. 2 minutes a day with a student, 10 days in a row. I think anybody can do that, especially in this hard environment right now. So that one goes to that disengage factor of the root causes. Last but not least, our go-to instruction. So just using small group instruction through some of those programs or curricula that you have goes to aversion in attendance root cause worksheet. But any function, excuse me, you remember any function here, disengagement, escape, seeking attention, any lack of skills, you can use social group instruction. It's why it's great if you have some of those approved programs, you can focus on those to tier that instruction within PBIS. Just as a reminder, because I can't leave you alone about it, tier 1 includes social skill formats. So we gave you some of those sample lessons as a reminder. But here you're considering what skills are barriers to attendance or causing that discipline. It is best to use that evidence-based curricula. If not, following that social skill lesson format, like we train on in tier 1, is your closest to that evidence-based or research-based approach. Now, reason I'm going to be transitioning to Katrina here in just a second is we do run into, particularly with attendance and discipline, when do we need to involve mental health staff, which they are great people to use their expertise to consult on some of those tier 1 routines we mentioned, or how to use different instructional tools for students. But we also might need them here for, of course, kids who are having anxiety, depression, or have had trauma exposure as some of those barriers to attendance or causing discipline. We know that's natural for any of that exposure. So how are we going to use their expertise? Same with tier 3, guys. So tier 3 is obviously that 5 to 10%, or if they're 5 to 10% if we're not meeting tier 1, or we're intensifying. I mentioned that earlier to the point. If we're doing some things in tier 1, we might also identify our students with those screening criteria. 20% or more instructional, they're way off track. Students with 2 or more suspension that first quarter are way off track, probably likely to have another one. So we want to intervene there, despite what tier 1 says. And then successful with tier 2 supports, we're going to be intensifying. What I want you to think about here, and as Katrina kind of talks through what they do in Duval, is the intensity is important for resiliency and problem solving because you're increasing that family and student engagement here. They are a part of that team. They should be kind of across tiers, but it's definitely at that tier 3 level. We gave you one of Attendance Works resources that kind of exemplifies what that looks like at that individual student level. And then expertise. This is what you are saving your best and brightest in behavior and mental health, and then also community partners for wraparound, because we do know there's many barriers to attendance that are sometimes things we can't intervene on in school, and wraparound or community partners can be very helpful here. Last two is do not forget here, we need to increase our support to classroom teachers with, of course, that idea of even more frequent data on how's it going for us and are we doing it correctly. So that's how we do that flow chart on the right there and what we think through with tier 3 interventions there. But same interventions, guys, that we talk about in tier 3 systems all the time. FBA BIPs, mental health, individualized counseling, those wraparound supports. Okay. Every tier ends with this is resiliency. Is it working for us? If we're not ensuring things are working for students with decision rules, we're not promoting resiliency. So we have to, any of these things we're doing and working so hard to provide, using some good decision rules for when things are working to fade or intensify supports. So this is our little quick walkaway visual there and several problem solving materials for you, but that's that resiliency connection. Plus, if you want more examples of decision rules, we hyperlinked our resource there. All right, Miss Katrina. She is my favorite in mental health passion and work, and I would like to give, I'm sorry, I only did 11 minutes for you, and I'm hoping a couple people can stay on a little bit longer. How you focused on attendance, and I told her I was going to highlight this. This is one of her messaging from her team that I thought was
Yes,
great. Katrina, you want to talk
yes.
about that?
Sure. Can you hear me okay, Kat?
I
I'm
can hear you
doing
great.
it from my phone. Okay, great. Right. So, good afternoon, everyone. So, as you know, everyone in here is from Florida. Attendance has not only impacted Florida tremendously post-COVID, but it has also impacted the nation, right? And so we decided as a district to take a tier 1 approach to addressing attendance. And one way that we did that is through our district website. So what you see that Kat shared on the screen before you is our district website that's under the parent tab that states why it's important. that your child should be in school and why it matters and how that directly impacts our students' academic as well as behavior. Because we all know if a student is in school, they can't learn. Not only that, if a student isn't in school when they return to school because they can't learn the curriculum, there's going to be behavior concerns. So this is something that we have on our website. We just had a conversation with our district communications department, and we're going to be starting an attendance campaign at the start of the year around attendance and how to re-engage parents. We've thought about some really amazing themes to come up with for this attendance campaign because I'm sure, like you all, we see a decrease in school attendance after the holiday break. So this is something simple that we've already done, which is the school website, but we're gonna build upon that existing infrastructure while doing an attendance campaign after the start of the year to really keep that momentum going.
Awesome, Katrina.
Some,
And I will just
Go
link
ahead.
to her. I was going to link to it and let her talk about the mental health plan. The
Yes.
school climate culture office does PBIS, and they have my district coordinator in that area, and they have a plan district wide that they use for that culture and climate piece. But
Hmm.
Katrina is our expert on the right mental health interventions, those social skill instructions. How do you use those in the district and support your staff with mental health expertise versus everyday educators?
Absolutely. So, what we do is we have our school counselors to implement those Sanford Harmony lessons for classroom guidance. So they go into classrooms weekly to provide those classroom guidance lessons, social skills lessons to our students. We also have our school social workers who also implement these lessons through Tier One. So those brief solution focused counseling, social skills groups, they also implement that. And we also have a partnership through our city as well as United Way of Northeast Florida, called Full Service Schools, and they're our mental health service providers. And so they provide that cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as TFCBT, that trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy, for those students that struggle, not only behaviorally, but also in attendance. We know that there's a direct correlation between the two of those. And we also know if we could get students to come to school, they can learn. If they learn, we have the decrease in behavior. So it's like a trickle effect. We know that. We know it's a trickle down effect. How those three things are interconnected with ensuring that our students go to school. So we work collaboratively. We also um, implement Wellness Wednesday in our school district, which is what we do monthly to build upon not only those students that have attendance concerns or behavior concerns, but all of our students to receive 30 minutes of mental health instruction monthly, that they receive that to be more preventative in nature, to increase our MTSS framework from a preventative perspective.
Awesome, Katrina, thank you. And she does have other examples. I just pulled
No
one to the
problem.
idea of approved curricula that every educator can use at the top, and then how she tiers her cognitive behavioral therapy with mental health expertise at tier 2 and 3. So I
Yes,
just, again, she's my favorite
absolutely.
passionate expert. Other walkaway points you would, through your lens, that you say for how you support MTSS through that resiliency lens, or how you
Yes,
support schools with
certainly.
that mental health expertise.
Yes. So one thing that we just started through a partnership with our local hospital, Baptist Health, and United Way of Northeast Florida, we have grow teams in our secondary schools. So I know you're probably wondering, what is a grow team, right? So that's gain resilience, obtain wellness. They are mental health clubs. And so this is our resiliency piece. I'm so proud of this because this is year 4 that we've been doing this. It's fully funded by our partner. Right now, we currently have grow teams in 15 of our 21 high schools, and we just started for the first time doing them in our middle schools this year. So in 7 of our middle schools, we also have grow teams with the overall goal to increase resilience and decrease risk. That's the goal. It is a tier 1 model. It is not a support group. It is not just for students that have mental health concerns, but it's absolutely a way to build up those resiliency standards in our students so they know how to combat when they're struggling, and that inadvertently increases school-wide attendance. We also have a plethora of different um, resiliency education programs that we use. As Pat stated, we use Sanford Harmony. We use School Connect. I don't know how you guys are familiar you are with that, but we utilize that through our in our secondary schools. As I mentioned, we have Wellness Wednesday. which is something that we implement monthly in all of our schools, not just secondary, but K-12 continuum. We implement Wellness Wednesday, that mental health instruction. We also have character counts. That's something that we do as well on a tier one perspective in our schools as well, and many others in reference to increasing those that resilience in our students so they can come to school ready to learn. And we believe in the other side of the A. Kat has heard me say that we're a school district for the first time. And I believe it's the other side of the A. When we think about A, we think about academics, math, science, language arts. So we think about those, but there's an other side of the A. And that's the work that I do every single day with my team. And that is through attendance, that is through behavior, that is through mental health, that is through the word that we don't like to say, social emotional. And so these are ways that we work to increase our students' resilience so they can be ready to learn. I'm very excited about the work that we're doing in Duval County Public Schools to do that.
Oh, Katrina, you're amazing. And I did want to prompt if
Thank
it
you.
if it jogs a memory. Did you have
Okay.
a time where you went out in the community about attendance and kind of asked
Yes,
neighborhoods for what their barriers
that's what
were?
I,
Okay, share
yes.
that
So one
story.
of,
Oh no, we lost you. Katrina. Oh, Katrina, we lost you. Oh, that is devastating, friends. I'm not gonna lie. Well, what I will do, and if she doesn't join us again, the short gist was she went out as a leader in the community to ask, oh, there she is, to ask people about why they had barriers to attendance. Katrina, are you back?
yes, I touched
Okay,
my
sorry,
ear.
go
I have on
ahead.
my Bluetooth. I have my Bluetooth in and I touched my ear and it hung up. But as I stated, one of our struggling schools that have actually was a school that was on our state monitoring. They've been on the state monitoring for years, and for the first time ever, this school received an A. And I strongly believe it's because of the work we're doing in the community. This is a school that is full of, this is an area community school that's full of violence, full of poverty. Just a school that you would know that these students are struggling tremendously because there's so much trauma that exists in the community. So we believe in meeting the families where they are in this particular community. We had to go out and knock on doors. So I myself and my team, the school is about 50 of us that went into this subsidized housing community, right? And so we went in this community of the subsidized housing and knocked on doors. And your student wasn't in school today. Is there anything that we can do to support them? Are there any barriers? What do you need? Is it food, clothing, shelter, uniform? What is it that we can do to get your students in school? First, the parents were very stunned that we came and we knocked on their door. And furthermore, they saw that they were being seen. That you noticed that their child wasn't in the building. So that's something that we did. The school is called Northwestern High School. Actually, the school received its first A grade ever. Not only that, today I just found out that principal got Principal of the Year for our school district. And so just some really great work going down. Rome wasn't built in a day, as I said. This was a school that was traditionally an F school. They were under state monitoring, and to see where they are after this year is absolutely amazing.
Oh, oh, Katrina, I could let you talk all day. I'm sorry I didn't leave you
No
full
worries.
15 minutes. You know
That's
me.
fine. That's
She
okay.
is amazing. Reach out to her. She's one of, like I said, the most passionate mental health resiliency leaders I know. Does amazing work. We will invite her back also. I want
Thank
to
you.
thank her for being here while she's at the school-based mental health conference. Enjoy, Katrina.
Yes, yes.
Um,
I'm at the school Advancing School Mental Health Conference. I don't know if any of you all on the call are here. This is an amazing conference, and it's
or
here in
say hi.
Orlando, Florida. So very excited about being here and sharing the great work that we're doing in Duval County, as well as learning what the great work is happening nationally in the school mental health plan.
You're amazing, Katrina. Thank you so much.
Thank
I want
you.
to be cognizant of time. It is 11 on the dot. I know I'm jumping on another one, as many are. Katrina, thank you. Thank you for
You're
joining us
welcome.
today. Please
Thank
complete the
you.
poll, guys. And if you want more, if there's specific resources you would like from this big topic, please let your TA know. We do have a wealth of things we can point you towards, or we are also going to be reading some new products in attendance, and it would be helpful to have your feedback. So thank you for joining us. Please complete the poll. And like I said, give your TA contact or your district coordinator if you're a school anything that would be helpful in terms of products or resources for you. Thanks, guys, and have a great day.